Animal species that have the mother take care of the young are able to remove diversity from their numbers. These will be favored by the evolutionary process. In layman's terms, they will come to dominate the planet. The transition, however, will have certain problems. The increased survival rate of the young causes the same deselection effects as losing the predator. No species could survive the transition to having the mother protect the nest and young because every attribute would slide right out. The species would become extinct. Interesting. Now another quick diversion is required to examine an interesting attribute known as the endothermic metabolism, or warm blood. How did it get in there? The benefits of warm blood can be seen now, but an animal did not just give birth to an offspring with warm blood. The blood had to slowly warm over generations. But how is this possible? An animal whose blood is slightly warmer than its siblings must eat more food. It must either risk greater exposure to predators or injury from its prey by eating more. Therefore, it is less likely to survive. It is impossible for the endothermic metabolism to evolve into a species, and yet it did. Interesting. So now there are two, seemingly unrelated, problems. One is that the survival rate of an animal species making the transition to having the mother care for the young is so high that the attributes would slide right out. And the other is that it is impossible to incorporate the endothermic metabolism into a species since, during the transition, it is less likely that the animals with slightly warmer blood will survive. And yet, fossil evidence shows that the dinosaurs took care of their young, and they had warm blood. Maybe this is not just a coincidence. Here are two generic population distribution curves for a species. The upper one represents the parental emotion force within the species, and the lower one represents the body temperature. Some of the females in the species will have a below-average parental emotion force, some will have an above-average force, while the majority will be average. In the same manner, the animals will have below, above, and average body temperature values. The two curves are independent of each other. The females with the weak parental emotion force will have below, above, and average body temperatures. Likewise, the females with the average and above average parental force will have below, above, and average body temperatures. The females with the strongest parental emotion force will tend to stay closer to their offspring. This will reduce the diversity in the species and is the desired evolutionary path. Females with the strongest parental emotion force and lowest body temperature would seem to be favored since they will lose fewer numbers to predators and will have to eat the least amount of food. But this combination will generate many sliders which will lead to extinction. Females with the strongest parental emotion force and highest body temperature will lose fewer numbers to predators, but the weakest of their numbers will find it difficult to consume enough food to survive. The increased survival rate caused by the mother protecting the offspring will be countered by an increased loss among the weakest who cannot consume enough food. With this configuration, no sliders are generated. As the parental emotion force increases over time, it is countered by an increase in the body temperature. The two rise together and enable the species to make the transition to having a mother take care of her young. An attribute that is accepted in order to ensure the death of the weakest will be known as a crippler. The crippler that enabled dinosaurs to transition to having the mother take care of their eggs and young was the endothermic metabolism. This forced the individual animals to consume far more food, making it difficult for the weak to survive. With randomness in the survival of the young reduced, dinosaurs were able to incorporate beneficial defects into their form more efficiently. They adapted faster, making it possible for them to dominate the planet. And they ruled until an asteroid smacked into the planet and wiped them out. Or is there another possibility? Dinosaurs were able to eliminate a lot of randomness from the survival of the young, but not all. There remained the problem of big mom, little egg. It is hard for a mother to protect her eggs when the predators are about the size of the eggs. Rather than defend her eggs, she can counter by destroying the eggs of the predator. The balance would be maintained. But what would happen if the egg thieves started carrying their young inside the mother's body and giving birth to live offspring? Under this assault, the dinosaurs would have been decimated. Those that survived would need a way to get away from the thieves. They took to the trees, forming seasonal pair bonds so that one adult was always there to protect their offspring. The egg thieves would have such a high survival rate that many of their attributes would be lost. Poisons, armor, and massive size would have slid right out, and they would have to accept a crippler, the great mammalian crippler. The thread generator was not being used while the body was awake, so it was the item that grew to the extent seen in humans today. With more memory to assist it, the conscious now dominates the human brain. Intelligence comes from multipass processing, where concepts are refined by passing them through the subconscious time and time again. But what is wrong with this? Why is this a crippler? Here is the model of a reptile hunting its prey. It is responding solely to external patterns. Masters of the ambush hunt, they produce no extraneous patterns to take their focus off of their meal. And here is the model of a mammal hunting its prey. In addition to the external patterns, the conscious loops patterns around, generating stress at the anticipation of a meal. This slows the mammal's reactions and makes it more likely to strike early. But, you protest vehemently, intelligence gives mammals an edge in the hunt. Yes and no. Remember that the system always seeks a balance between predator and prey. If one gains an advantage in one area, it must be countered by a loss in another. That is why poisons, armor, and massive size slid out of the mammalian form. Wolves hunt in packs because they can, not because they have to. If wolves hunted alone, the attributes of the caribou they hunt would have to slide to match, or both species would become extinct. Taken to the extreme of intelligence seen in humans, the conscious destabilizes the brain. Here is the model of a reptile in a box. The only patterns running through are there to process internal body functions. It is perfectly stable. Here is a model of a human sitting in a cage with no external contact. The conscious loops patterns around, triggering emotions and increasing the stress. The stress monitoring device responds by dumping adrenaline into the body. While this gives extra energy, it also makes it more difficult to fall and then stay asleep. Worse, if the stress level becomes high enough, the device will automatically trigger the fight-flight response. With no threat to distract the conscious, it focuses on the extra adrenaline. This causes the stress level to rise, causing an increase in the adrenaline, causing an increase in the stress level, causing an increase in the adrenaline, causing an increase in the stress level, and the individual experiences an anxiety or panic attack. Even worse, if the individual focuses on one thought, conditioned threads will form, changing how the subconscious responds. According to the model, the conscious does not see reality. It sees a reality that has passed through the subconscious. In anorexia nervosa, a conditioned thread replaced the need to feed with the sensation of being fat. The conscious no longer feels hunger. It just feels fat. The human brain is so unstable that it requires constant external influence just to remain usable. Without this, it will retreat into the conscious and generate a fantasy world. Conditioned threads will change how reality is interpreted. A dog barking can be interpreted as a human talking. Great stress is generated, creating unbearable anguish. When enough conditioned threads are generated, the brain becomes completely unusable. The person becomes insane. And the parents are not to be blamed for that. Nowhere is the devastating effects of the conscious seen more evident than in the subconscious's quick fix to the logic error generated when the pattern response table was closed off.